the grim world of ancient punishments. Welcome back to another quiet journey through history's darker corners. Tonight, we'll explore the measured rhythms of justice and punishment across ancient civilizations, those strange, inevitable patterns that shaped how societies dealt with wrongdoing, how they sought balance, and how they tried to maintain order in an uncertain world. There's something oddly comforting about the predictability of these old systems, isn't there? The careful rituals, the methodical procedures, the slow bureaucracy of consequence. Tonight, we'll witness the quiet dedication of an executioner's assistant in imperial China. Sit through the measured deliberations that sealed Socrates' fate. Observe the peculiar logic of trial by ordeal in Anglo Saxon England. And finally rest in the shadowed chambers where Babylonian judges dispensed their ancient wisdom. These stories unfold with the weight of inevitability, not thrilling, but strangely soothing in their completeness. Justice, after all, has always moved at its own pace, deliberate and unhurried, like the turning of seasons or the slow erosion of stone. So settle in. Let the weight of these old certainties wash over you as we explore how our ancestors sought to make sense of right and wrong, punishment and redemption, in a world where such things moved with a measured cadence of ritual and tradition. Verse 1. Daily life immersion, working as an assistant to the executioner in Qing China. The morning mist clings to the courtyard stones as you arrive before dawn, your footsteps muffled by centuries of similar footfalls. This is the third year of your apprenticeship to Master Lu, the chief executioner of the provincial capital, and by now, the rhythm of preparation has become as familiar as your own heartbeat. The executioner's compound sits apart from the main government buildings, separated by a small garden where nothing grows but bamboo and a single ancient pine. The isolation isn't accidental. Your profession exists in the shadows of respectability necessary, sanctioned, but never celebrated. The Qing officials who order the executions rarely speak directly to Master Lu, and they certainly don't acknowledge your existence. Messages arrive through intermediaries, wrapped in formal language that somehow makes the grim work feel bureaucratic, almost mundane. You begin each execution day by preparing the tools with the same methodical care a calligrapher might give to arranging brushes and inkstones. The broad sword, the instrument of merciful beheading, reserved for those of higher social standing, must be cleaned with rice wine and sharpened to perfect keenness. Master Lu taught you that a dull blade is not just inefficient, it's cruel. Swift completion honors both the condemned and the law, he would say, his weathered hands guiding yours along the whetstone surface. The smaller knives, used for the more elaborate punishments prescribed by the legal code, receive equal attention. Each has its purpose, its place in the careful choreography of imperial justice. The Qing legal system, you've learned, recognizes dozens of different punishments, each calibrated to match the severity and nature of the crime. There's an odd precision to it all, a mathematical relationship between transgression and consequence that your rational mind finds almost soothing. By the time the sun clears the compound walls, you've arranged everything according to the patterns Master Lu learned from his predecessor, who learned from his, stretching back through generations of careful tradition. The wooden execution block, worn smooth by decades of use, sits at the precise center of the designated area. Sand has been scattered around its base, not for drama, but for practicality. Everything here serves a purpose, follows a logic, maintains an order. The condemned arrive in a procession that unfolds with ceremonial gravity. Magistrates in their formal robes, guards maintaining perfect formation, clerks carrying the death warrants with their neat columns of characters confirming names, crimes, and prescribed punishments. The prisoners themselves often seem almost secondary to this administrative ballet small figures in a larger ritual of state authority. You've noticed how differently people face their final moments. Some arrive in a state of resigned calm, having spent their imprisonment preparing through prayer or meditation. Others maintain their innocence to the end, though the appeals process has long since concluded. A few seem almost relieved, particularly those who've endured lengthy imprisonments or whose crimes have brought shame upon their families. For them, this final ceremony represents completion, the settlement of accounts both legal and spiritual. Master Lu has taught you to observe these variations with professional detachment, but also with human compassion. We serve the law, he explains, but we serve it humanely. The condemned person's last moments should be conducted with dignity. This philosophy shapes every aspect of your work, from the timing of actions to the tone of voice used in necessary communications. The actual executions proceed with swift efficiency. Master Lu's movements are economical, practiced, precise. There's no hesitation, no wasted motion. Years of experience have taught him exactly how to position the condemned, how to angle the blade, how to complete his task with minimum suffering. You assist by ensuring everything remains in proper order, maintaining the tools, managing the administrative requirements, helping to preserve the ceremony's dignity. Afterwards comes the careful cleanup, the respectful handling of remains, the completion of paperwork that officially records the law's fulfillment. Bodies are released to families who can afford burial, or transported to the potter's field for those without means. Even this final disposition follows established procedures, maintains its own patterns of respect and order. Between execution days, which occur perhaps once or twice each month, you help Master Liu with his other responsibilities. The imperial legal code requires various forms of corporal punishment. Bamboo beatings measured in precise numbers of strokes, public exhibitions of wrongdoers, the application of wooden stocks that hold offenders in uncomfortable but non-damaging positions for prescribed periods. These lesser punishments also follow their own rhythms and rituals. The magistrate's court convenes on scheduled days, hearing cases and pronouncing sentences with the same methodical care applied to more serious crimes. Your role involves preparing the instruments of punishment, ensuring accurate administration of sentences, maintaining records that track completion of court orders. The work requires physical stamina, certainly, but more importantly, it demands mental discipline and emotional balance. You've learned to compartmentalize the grimmer aspects of your duties, to focus on the service you provide to the system of justice rather than dwelling on individual tragedies. Master Liu often reminds you that your work represents the final link in a long chain of legal proceedings, investigations, arrests, trials, appeals, reviews. By the time cases reach the execution ground, they've passed through multiple levels of scrutiny and confirmation. This perspective helps maintain the psychological distance necessary for continued service. You're not making judgments about guilt or innocence, determining appropriate sentences, or deciding questions of law. You're simply ensuring that decisions made by properly constituted authority are carried out efficiently and humanely. In its way, this represents a form of civic duty, unglamorous perhaps, but essential to the functioning of organized society. The isolation of your profession extends beyond the physical separation of the executioner's compound. Few people understand the strange combination of technical skill, emotional resilience, and administrative competence your work requires. Neighbors in the district where you live know your occupation, but rarely discuss it directly. Shopkeepers serve you politely, but without warmth. Children are taught to avoid playing near your residence, though more from superstition than genuine fear. This social separation isn't entirely unwelcome. The weight of your responsibilities requires regular periods of solitude and reflection. In the evenings, after completing the day's duties, you often sit in the small garden behind your quarters, listening to the evening sounds of the city settling into night. The distant calls of vendors, the soft conversations drifting from neighboring courtyards, the measured striking of temple bells marking the passage of hours. All these ordinary sounds create a peaceful counterpoint to the grimmer rhythms of your working life. Master Liu, now in his 6th decade of service, speaks sometimes of retirement and the question of succession. The position of chief executioner like many roles in imperial administration, often passes within families or through carefully selected apprenticeships. Your own recruitment to this work came through distant family connections and demonstrated aptitude for the physical and psychological demands involved. The prospect of eventually assuming full responsibility both attracts and concerns you. The technical aspects of the work no longer present difficulties. You've mastered the required skills and procedures. But the weight of ultimate accountability and knowledge that hundreds of final moments will rest in your hands creates a different kind of pressure. Master Lu assures you this sense of responsibility never entirely disappears, but transforms over time into a kind of solemn dedication that makes the work bearable. As winter approaches and the execution schedule lightens, cold weather creates practical difficulties for outdoor ceremonies. You spend more time on maintenance tasks and administrative duties. The tools require seasonal preparation. Records need updating and filing. Supplies must be ordered and stored. These mundane activities provide welcome respite from more intense responsibilities, while maintaining the steady rhythms that structure your professional life. The compound itself requires regular attention. Walls need periodic repair. Gardens must be tended. Buildings require maintenance against weather and wear. You find satisfaction in these ordinary tasks, sweeping courtyards, replacing worn floor mats, repairing loose roof tiles. They connect your strange profession to the universal human activities of maintaining order, preserving useful things, preparing for future needs. This quiet maintenance work often continues into the evening hours, when the compound's isolation becomes most pronounced. The government district grows still after sunset, official business concluding with the day's final administrative sessions. Guards make their rounds with measured steps, their lanterns casting shifting pools of light across empty courtyards. Temple bells mark the progression of night watches, their bronze voices carrying across sleeping neighborhoods with ancient authority. In this stillness, the moral complexities of your work seem less pressing, overwhelmed by the simple satisfaction of completed tasks and orderly surroundings. Tomorrow will bring its own requirements, perhaps a scheduled execution, perhaps routine court duties, perhaps merely the ongoing work of preparation and maintenance. Whatever comes, it will unfold according to established patterns, guided by centuries of accumulated wisdom about how societies address the problem of wrongdoing. The certainty of these patterns, their predictable unfolding, creates its own form of peace. Justice moves slowly, but inevitably, like the progression of seasons or the patient wearing away of stone by water. Your small role in this larger process connects you to something both ancient and enduring, the human struggle to create order, maintain standards, and find appropriate responses to the disruptions that threaten social harmony. As you complete the day's final tasks and secure the compound for night, the weight of tomorrow's responsibilities feels manageable. Absorbed into the larger rhythm of duty and service, it gives shape to your unusual life. Verse 2. The trial of Socrates, a death by philosophy. The year is 399 BCE, and Athens breathes with the measured rhythm of a city still recovering from war and plague. The great democracy that once seemed invincible has been humbled by defeat, its confidence shaken by years of struggle against Sparta. In this atmosphere of uncertainty and introspection, an old man named Socrates finds himself at the center of accusations that will, in their quiet way, reshape how we think about wisdom, justice, and the price of asking uncomfortable questions. Socrates is 70 years old now, his body showing the wear of 7 decades, but his mind is sharp and relentless as ever. For most of his adult life, he has wandered the agora, the marketplace that serves as Athens' intellectual heart, engaging anyone willing to listen in conversations that begin with simple questions and end with the comfortable certainties of conventional wisdom lying in tatters. The charges against him seem almost mundane in their brevity: corrupting the youth of Athens, introducing new gods, and failing to honor the traditional deities of the city. But beneath these formal accusations, lies something more troubling. Growing discomfort with the way Socrates' persistent questioning undermines the very foundations upon which Athenian society rests. The trial takes place in the Heliaia, a great law court that can accommodate up to 6,000 jurors. Today, 501 citizens have been selected by lot to hear the case, an odd number chosen deliberately to prevent tied votes. They sit in tiered sections, these farmers and craftsmen and merchants who will decide whether Athens' most famous philosopher lives or dies. The morning sun slants through the court's open spaces as Meletus, the young poet who has brought the charges, rises to present his case. His voice carries the righteous indignation of someone who believes he's defending civilization itself against the corrosive effects of skeptical inquiry. Socrates, he argues, has spent decades undermining respect for the gods, teaching young men to question everything their fathers held sacred, spreading intellectual poison disguised as wisdom. Meletus speaks with the passionate conviction of youth, but his arguments reveal the curious circularity that often characterizes moral panic. Socrates is dangerous because he questions authority. Questioning authority is wrong because it threatens stability. Therefore, Socrates must be stopped. The logic feels airtight to those already convinced, but it rests on assumptions that Socrates has spent his life examining. When Socrates rises to defend himself, his approach immediately sets him apart from the typical defendant. He doesn't plead for mercy or attempt to evoke sympathy. Instead, he does what he has always done: he asks questions. Why, he wonders aloud, should the pursuit of wisdom be considered a crime? If he has indeed corrupted the youth, why haven't their parents come forward to testify against him? And if he truly doesn't believe in the gods, why has he spent his life following what he believes to be a divine mission? The defense unfolds with the patient logic of a master craftsman working familiar materials. Socrates explains his famous method, the persistent questioning that reveals how little anyone truly knows about the most important things. He describes his encounters with politicians, poets, and craftsmen, all of whom claimed wisdom in areas where they possessed only opinion. His mission, he suggests, has been to expose this false wisdom, to clear away the accumulated nonsense that prevents genuine understanding. But there's something unsettling about Socrates' defense, even for those sympathetic to his cause. He refuses to play the role of humble defendant seeking the court's mercy. Instead, he suggests that rather than being punished, he should be rewarded, perhaps with free meals at the city's expense, like victorious Olympic athletes. This proposal, delivered with characteristic irony, demonstrates either remarkable courage or spectacular misjudgment of his audience's mood. The jury deliberates without leaving their seats, dropping bronze tokens into urns to indicate their votes. The counting proceeds with ceremonial gravity, each vote representing not just a judgment on Socrates' guilt or innocence, but a broader verdict on the value of philosophical inquiry itself. When the results are announced, 280 jurors have voted for conviction, 221 for acquittal. The margin is closer than many expected, but the result is clear. Under Athenian law, prosecution and defense must now propose alternative penalties, and the jury will choose between them. Meletus demands death. Socrates, after rejecting his friend's suggestions of exile or substantial fines, proposes a token payment of 1 mina of silver. The contrast couldn't be more stark: death versus what amounts to a symbolic fine. This second vote proves more decisive. Faced with what seems like Socrates' continued defiance, more jurors opt for the death penalty. The final tally shows that some who voted for acquittal have now voted for execution, convinced perhaps that Socrates' attitude demonstrates the very arrogance and disrespect for Athenian values that the charges alleged. But the trial's end brings no sense of resolution, no feeling that justice has been clearly served. Socrates accepts the verdict with the same calm curiosity he has applied to every other aspect of human experience. Death, he suggests, is either a dreamless sleep or a journey to another realm, where he can continue his conversations with the great figures of the past. Either possibility strikes him as preferable to abandoning the philosophical life that has given his existence meaning. The 30 days between sentence and execution unfold with surreal normalcy. Athenian law requires that the sacred ship sent annually to Delos must return before any execution can be carried out, and contrary winds have delayed its voyage. Socrates spends this time in prison, continuing the conversations that have filled his life, seemingly untroubled by his approaching death. His friends visit regularly, bringing food and news from the outside world. They've arranged for his escape. The guards have been bribed. A ship waits in a nearby port. Exile in a distant city has been arranged. But Socrates refuses to flee. Having lived his entire life in accordance with Athenian law, he argues he cannot now violate it simply because it has turned against him. The consistency of this position reflects the same logical rigor he has applied to every other ethical question. These prison conversations, later recorded by his student Plato, reveal a man facing death with remarkable equanimity. Socrates discusses the nature of the soul, the possibility of afterlife, the relationship between wisdom and virtue. His tone remains conversational, almost casual, as if death were simply another philosophical problem to be examined rather than a personal catastrophe to be feared. The execution itself follows established ritual. Socrates bathes, says farewell to his wife and children, then drinks the hemlock prepared by the prison's official executioner. The poison works slowly, gradually numbing his body from the feet upward while leaving his mind clear until the final moments. He uses this time to continue teaching, describing the physical sensations of dying with the same detached curiosity he has brought to every other aspect of human experience. His final words, according to Plato's account, concern a debt owed to Asclepius, the god of healing. Whether this represents genuine religious devotion, philosophical irony, or simple attention to mundane obligations remains unclear, fittingly, perhaps, for a man who made uncertainty his life's work. The immediate aftermath of Socrates' death brings no dramatic revelations or sudden social transformations. Athens continues its slow recovery from war and plague. Its citizens resume their normal activities. The political and intellectual life of the city flows on much as before. But something has changed, though its full significance won't become apparent for generations. The trial has demonstrated the tension between individual conscience and social conformity, between the pursuit of truth and the demands of civic harmony. Socrates' refusal to compromise his principles, even in the face of death, establishes a powerful precedent for intellectual integrity. His calm acceptance of an unjust sentence paradoxically demonstrates both the limits of Athenian democracy and the transcendent power of philosophical commitment. The 501 jurors who condemned him return to their farms and workshops, their civic duty complete. Most probably feel they've made the right decision, protecting their city from a dangerous influence. A few may harbor doubts, wondering whether they've participated in something shameful. But the immediate pressures of daily life, earning a living, raising families, maintaining households, soon overwhelm such abstract concerns. The real impact of Socrates' trial lies not in its immediate consequences, but in its lasting influence on how we think about the relationship between the individual and society, between moral truth and political expediency. His death transforms him from a local gadfly into a universal symbol of the philosopher's commitment to truth regardless of personal cost. The students who witnessed his final days carry forward his method of persistent questioning, his commitment to rational inquiry, his belief that the unexamined life is not worth living. They establish schools, write dialogues, develop systematic philosophies that trace their origins back to that old man who wandered the Athenian agora, asking uncomfortable questions. In the decades following his death, as Athens' political influence wanes and other powers dominate the Mediterranean world, Socrates' intellectual legacy grows stronger. The questions he raised about justice, virtue, knowledge, and the good life prove more enduring than the military victories and political achievements that seemed so important to his contemporaries. The trial that was meant to silence a troublesome voice instead ensures that voice will echo through the centuries, challenging each generation to examine its own assumptions and comfortable certainties. The 501 jurors who voted for death could hardly have imagined they were participating in one of history's most significant moments, or that their decision would be debated and analyzed for millennia to come. As evening settles over ancient Athens on that final day, the city sleeps much as it has for centuries, its citizens unaware that they have just witnessed the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in humanity's ongoing conversation with itself about the nature of wisdom, justice, and the proper way to live. Verse 3. Trial by ordeal in Anglo Saxon England? When boiling water judged your guilt. The year is 1015, and in a small village in Wessex, the morning air carries the scent of wood smoke and the quiet murmur of voices gathering for what may be the most solemn ceremony their community will witness this year. A theft has been committed, grain stolen from the village's common store during the lean weeks before harvest. The accused stands before the assembled villagers, their fate to be determined not by human judgment, but by the will of God as revealed through the ancient ritual of trial by ordeal. The Anglo-Saxon world operates on certainties that seem almost quaint to modern minds, that divine justice will manifest itself through physical trials, that guilt or innocence can be determined by how quickly a burn heals, that boiling water will harm the wicked while protecting the righteous. These beliefs aren't mere superstition. They represent a sophisticated legal system that has evolved over centuries to address the fundamental problem of determining truth in a world without forensic science, without witnesses, without the elaborate evidentiary procedures of later legal systems. The ordeal by hot water, the judicium aqui ferventis, follows procedures as carefully codified as any modern court proceeding. The ritual begins 3 days before the actual trial, with the accused required to abstain from certain foods and to maintain a state of spiritual purity through prayer and fasting. This preliminary period serves multiple purposes. It allows time for last-minute confessions or evidence to emerge. It ensures the accused approaches the ordeal in a properly reverent state of mind, and it gives the community time to prepare both practically and spiritually for the ceremony. The village priest plays a central role in these preparations. He consecrates the water that will be used, blesses the cauldron in which it will be heated, and ensures that every aspect of the ritual conforms to church doctrine. The Anglo-Saxon Church has developed elaborate liturgies for these occasions, complete with specific prayers, blessing formulas, and ceremonial requirements that transform what might otherwise be mere physical trials into sacred acts of divine consultation. On the morning of the ordeal, the entire community gathers in the churchyard or village square. The solemnity of the occasion is palpable. This isn't entertainment or spectacle, but a religious ceremony that will determine not just the fate of one individual, but the spiritual health of the entire community. The presence of a thief among them represents a form of pollution that must be identified and cleansed if social harmony is to be restored. The cauldron sits over a carefully tended fire, its water heated to a rolling boil. The priest tests the temperature by dropping in a stone or piece of iron, watching for the vigorous bubbling that indicates proper preparation. Everything must be done according to ancient prescription: the size of the cauldron, the amount of water, the intensity of the fire, the nature of the object to be retrieved. These details aren't arbitrary. They represent centuries of accumulated wisdom about how divine justice operates in the physical world. The accused approaches the cauldron with slow, measured steps, their hand already extended in preparation for the trial. The community watches in silence, their collective breath held as the moment of truth approaches. The priest offers a final prayer, asking God to reveal the truth through the ordeal about to unfold. The words of the prayer are ancient, passed down through generations of clergy, their Latin syllables carrying the weight of tradition and divine authority. The actual ordeal unfolds with startling swiftness. The accused plunges their hand into the boiling water, grasps the designated object, typically a stone or piece of iron, and withdraws it immediately. The entire action takes perhaps 3 seconds, but those seconds contain the concentrated essence of Anglo Saxon legal philosophy, the belief that divine justice will manifest itself through physical trial, that guilt or innocence can be determined by supernatural intervention in natural processes. The hand is immediately wrapped in clean cloth, sealed with wax, and marked with the priest's seal. This bandage must remain untouched for 3 days, during which the accused is kept under community supervision. The waiting period serves multiple purposes. It allows time for the burn to heal, it prevents tampering with the wound, and it creates a period of communal reflection on the moral implications of the case. During these 3 days, the village maintains an atmosphere of suspended judgment. Normal activities continue. Crops must be tended, animals fed, meals prepared, but underneath the routine of daily life runs an undercurrent of anticipation. The accused often spends this time in prayer and meditation, seeking divine forgiveness if they are indeed guilty, or divine vindication if they are innocent. The community, meanwhile, examines its own conscience, wondering whether their collective sins might influence the ordeal's outcome. The unwrapping of the hand on the 3rd day follows its own ritual protocol. The priest carefully removes the seal and bandages while the community watches in silence. The condition of the wound will determine the verdict. If the burn is healing cleanly, with no signs of infection or putrefaction, innocence is proven. If the wound appears infected, is failing to heal, or shows other signs of corruption, guilt is established beyond question. The medical reality behind these procedures is more complex than their spiritual interpretation suggests. The human hand, when briefly immersed in boiling water, sustains predictable injuries that heal according to well-understood biological processes. Factors like the accused's age, general health, cleanliness of the wound, and quality of the bandaging all influence the healing process. But the Anglo Saxon understanding of these trials operates on a different level entirely. They see divine intervention when we might see natural cause and effect. The psychological aspects of trial by ordeal are equally fascinating. The accused's mental state, their confidence in their innocence, or fear of divine judgment may actually influence their physical response to the trial. Stress, anxiety, and fear can affect immune function, blood flow, and healing processes in ways that might indeed correlate with guilt or innocence. The ordeal's effectiveness as a legal institution may derive partly from these psychosomatic factors, creating a system where the guilty are more likely to be convicted by their own psychological responses. The community's role in these proceedings extends beyond mere witness. They serve as a kind of collective jury, their presence lending moral authority to the proceedings, while their collective spiritual state potentially influences the outcome. The Anglo-Saxon legal system recognizes that justice isn't merely an individual matter. It's a community concern that requires community participation for proper resolution. Alternative forms of ordeal serve different purposes and accommodate different circumstances. The ordeal by cold water involves binding the accused and lowering them into a pond or river. If they sink, they're innocent. If they float, they're guilty. The logic here reverses that of the hot water trial. Pure water will accept the innocent but reject the guilty. This ordeal is typically used for accusations of witchcraft or other spiritual crimes, where the accused's relationship with supernatural forces is specifically at issue. The ordeal by hot iron requires the accused to carry a piece of heated metal for a specified distance, usually 9 paces. Like the hot water trial, success is determined by how well the resulting burn heals over the following 3 days. This ordeal is often used for more serious crimes, where the severity of the trial reflects the gravity of the accusation. The ordeal by blessed bread the coarsened involves eating a piece of specially prepared bread while praying for divine justice. If the accused can swallow the bread without choking, they are innocent. This gentler form of ordeal is typically reserved for clergy or for less serious offenses, reflecting the Anglo Saxon understanding that different crimes require different forms of divine intervention. The legal framework surrounding these ordeals is surprisingly sophisticated. Anglo Saxon law codes specify which crimes are appropriate for which ordeals, establish procedures for conducting the trials, and outline the community's responsibilities during the process. The ordeal isn't a random superstition, but a carefully regulated legal institution that serves specific functions within the broader system of justice. The role of the Church in legitimizing and regulating these trials reflects the broader Christianization of Anglo-Saxon society. Earlier Germanic legal traditions probably included similar physical trials, but the Church's involvement transforms them into explicitly Christian rituals with theological justifications. The ordeal becomes not just a legal procedure, but a form of divine consultation, a way of seeking God's guidance in matters too complex for human judgment. The effectiveness of trial by ordeal as a legal institution depends partly on its deterrent effect. The prospect of undergoing such a trial may encourage confession, negotiated settlement, or other forms of resolution that avoid the ordeal entirely. In many cases, the threat of divine judgment may be more powerful than the actual trial itself, creating incentives for honest behavior and truthful testimony. The social dynamics surrounding these trials reveal much about Anglo-Saxon community life. The collective nature of the proceedings, the communal preparation, the public ceremony, the shared waiting period reinforces social bonds while establishing clear boundaries between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. The ordeal becomes a way of reaffirming community values and collective identity in the face of antisocial behavior. The gradual decline of trial by ordeal reflects broader changes in medieval society. As legal systems become more sophisticated, as literacy spreads, as evidence-based reasoning gains acceptance, the need for divine intervention in human affairs seems less pressing. The Fourth Lateran Council's prohibition of priestly participation in ordeals in 1215 effectively ends their use in most of Europe, though the underlying beliefs about divine justice persist in other forms. The evening after a successful ordeal, when the accused has been vindicated and the community's faith in divine justice confirmed, brings a sense of resolution that extends beyond the immediate case. The stolen grain has been accounted for, the thief identified, and the community's spiritual health restored. Normal life can resume, but with the comfortable knowledge that divine justice remains available when human wisdom proves inadequate. The Anglo-Saxon understanding of justice through ordeal represents a worldview where the physical and spiritual realms intersect in predictable ways, where divine will manifests through natural processes, and where community welfare depends on maintaining proper relationships with supernatural forces. These beliefs may seem primitive to modern minds, but they created legal institutions that successfully maintained social order for centuries, providing frameworks for justice that were both practically effective and spiritually satisfying. As the fire dies down and the community disperses, the tools of ordeal are carefully stored away until the next occasion demands their use. The cauldron is cleaned and blessed, the stones returned to their designated places, the ceremonial cloths folded and preserved. These implements of divine justice await the next disruption of social harmony, ready to serve again as conduits for supernatural intervention in human affairs. The quiet confidence of this system, its unquestioning faith in divine justice, its elaborate ritual procedures, its community-centered approach to legal resolution, creates a form of social peace that modern legal systems, for all their sophistication, sometimes struggle to achieve. The ordeal by hot water may seem crude and superstitious, but it represents humanity's persistent attempt to find certainty in an uncertain world, to locate truth in a realm beyond human manipulation, and to maintain social order through appeals to transcendent authority. Verse 4. A judge in Hammurabi's Babylon, the calm bureaucracy of ancient justice. The morning light filters through the narrow windows of the judgment hall as you take your seat upon the carved stone chair that has been occupied by judges for 3 generations of your family. It is the 15th year of your service to the great King Hammurabi, and the rhythm of dispensing justice has become as familiar as the seasonal flooding of the Euphrates. Today, like most days, will bring a steady procession of disputes, accusations, and appeals that require resolution according to the great law code that governs all life in Babylon. Your scribe sits at the low table beside your chair, reed stylus poised over a fresh clay tablet, ready to record the day's proceedings with the same meticulous care applied to grain inventories and tax assessments. The law requires detailed documentation of every case, not merely the final judgment, but the testimony of witnesses, the examination of evidence, the reasoning behind each decision. These records will be filed in the great archives, available for consultation by future judges facing similar cases, creating an ever-growing repository of legal precedent and administrative wisdom. The first case involves a merchant accused of using false weights in the grain market. The plaintiff, a farmer from one of the outlying settlements, presents his evidence with the careful deference appropriate to the court's dignity. He has brought the disputed weights, 2 witnesses who observed the transaction, and detailed accounting records that document the discrepancy between the grain delivered and the amount originally agreed upon. The case unfolds with methodical precision, each piece of evidence examined, each witness questioned, each relevant law carefully considered. Hammurabi's Great Code provides clear guidance for such matters. A penalty for fraudulent weights is specified exactly. The merchant must compensate the injured party 3-fold and face public humiliation in the marketplace where the fraud occurred. There is no ambiguity, no room for judicial discretion that might lead to inconsistent outcomes. The law's precision reflects the king's understanding that justice requires predictability. Citizens must know in advance what consequences will follow from their actions. You question the merchant with the same calm thoroughness applied to the plaintiff's testimony. His defense rests on claims of accidental error, suggestions that his servants may have replaced the proper weights without his knowledge, appeals to his previously unblemished reputation in the business community. These explanations receive respectful hearing, but the evidence clearly demonstrates deliberate fraud. The weights show signs of deliberate alteration. The pattern of discrepancies suggests systematic rather than random error, and the merchant's protests of innocence lack the supporting evidence that might excuse the violations. The judgment follows inevitably from the facts and the law. You pronounce the required penalty with the formal language prescribed for such pronouncements. Your words recorded exactly by the scribe for inclusion in the permanent record. The merchant accepts the decision with the resignation of someone who understands that the law's requirements admit no negotiation. He will pay the compensation, endure the public censure, and presumably conduct future business with greater attention to legal requirements. The morning's second case presents more complex challenges. A woman seeks divorce from her husband, claiming he has failed to provide adequate support for her and their children. Marriage law in Babylon recognizes several grounds for dissolution, but each requires specific forms of proof that protect both parties from frivolous or vengeful accusations. The woman must demonstrate not merely temporary hardship, but a pattern of neglect that violates the husband's fundamental obligations as defined by law and custom. Her testimony reveals the grinding details of domestic conflict, missed payments for household expenses, prolonged absences without explanation, failure to provide the clothing and jewelry appropriate to her social status. She has brought her father and brother as witnesses to corroborate her claims, along with neighbors who can testify to the household's declining condition. The evidence is substantial, but largely circumstantial, requiring careful evaluation to distinguish between normal marital difficulties and violations serious enough to justify legal intervention. The husband's defense focuses on external circumstances beyond his control: failed business ventures, illness that prevented normal work, economic disruptions caused by military campaigns in distant provinces. His explanations have merit, and he produces witnesses who can confirm some of his claimed difficulties. The case requires balancing competing claims of justice: the wife's right to adequate support against the husband's right to protection from dissolution based on temporary misfortunes. You spend considerable time examining the household's financial records, comparing the husband's claimed income with his documented expenses, seeking objective measures of his capacity to fulfill marital obligations. The mathematical precision of these calculations provides welcome relief from the emotional complexity of the personal testimony. Numbers don't lie, don't shade the truth to serve personal interests, don't require interpretation of motives or intentions. The law provides specific formulas for calculating adequate household support based on social status, family size, and regional economic conditions. These calculations reveal that the husband's support, while indeed reduced during recent difficult periods, has remained within legally acceptable limits when adjusted for documented economic hardships. The case for divorce, while emotionally compelling, lacks the legal foundation required for court intervention. Your judgment denies the divorce petition, but orders the husband to provide additional security for future support payments, a compromise that addresses the wife's legitimate concerns while respecting the husband's legal rights. Both parties express dissatisfaction with the outcome, a common response to judicial decisions that attempt to balance competing interests rather than providing complete victory to either side. The afternoon brings a succession of property disputes, each requiring detailed examination of land records, boundary markers, and inheritance documents. Babylon's prosperity depends heavily on accurate property rights, and the legal system has developed sophisticated procedures for resolving conflicts over ownership, usage rights, and inheritance claims. Your training in mathematics and surveying proves as important as your knowledge of legal precedent. Many cases turn on precise calculations of field measurements, irrigation rights, or crop yields. One particularly complex case involves three brothers disputing their father's estate. The deceased left detailed written instructions for property division, but questions have arisen about the validity of certain provisions and the proper interpretation of others. Each brother has retained legal advocates who present competing theories about inheritance law, supported by citations from previous court decisions and interpretations of relevant code provisions. The case requires hours of careful analysis, comparing the disputed will against established legal requirements, examining witness testimony about the deceased's intentions, calculating the economic value of various property components to ensure equitable distribution. The brothers' mutual hostility adds emotional complexity to an already challenging legal puzzle, requiring delicate management to prevent courtroom disruptions while ensuring all parties receive fair hearings. The resolution ultimately depends on a technical legal point about the required number of witnesses for certain types of bequests. The father's will includes provisions witnessed by only two individuals where the law requires three for dispositions of that magnitude. This deficiency invalidates the disputed portions of the will, requiring those property components to be distributed according to standard inheritance rules rather than the deceased's specific wishes. The judgment satisfies legal requirements while leaving all parties somewhat disappointed, a reminder that law and justice, while related concepts, don't always produce identical outcomes. The brothers will receive their inheritance according to established legal principles, but their father's intentions regarding property distribution will remain partially unfulfilled due to technical violations of documentary requirements. As evening approaches and the day's final cases are concluded, you review the completed tablets with your scribe, ensuring accurate recording of all proceedings. These documents will join thousands of others in the court archives, creating a permanent record of Babylonian legal life that future scholars may consult centuries hence. The meticulous documentation serves multiple purposes. It provides evidence for appeals or reviews, establishes precedents for similar future cases, and demonstrates the court's commitment to transparent, accountable justice. The physical act of justice, the careful questioning, the methodical examination of evidence, the precise application of legal principles creates its own form of satisfaction. Each resolved case represents a small contribution to social order, a demonstration that disputes can be settled through reason and law rather than force and favoritism. The accumulation of these individual decisions builds over time into a stable legal framework that allows commerce to flourish, families to plan for the future, and communities to resolve conflicts without resort to violence. Your role as judge connects you to the broader administrative structure that makes Babylonian civilization possible. The same principles of careful record keeping, precise measurement, and systematic organization that govern legal proceedings also shape the kingdom's military, agricultural, and commercial systems. Justice isn't separate from governance. It's an integral component of the organized social life that distinguishes civilization from chaos. The evening meal at your family compound provides opportunity to reflect on the day's work and prepare for tomorrow's responsibilities. Your wife asks about particularly interesting cases. Your children listen to simplified versions of legal stories that teach moral lessons about honesty, responsibility, and respect for authority. The law's wisdom extends beyond the courtroom into family life, shaping how children understand right and wrong, how adults conduct business relationships, how communities maintain harmony across generations. The great law code carved in stone and displayed in the temple represents more than mere legal requirements. It embodies King Hammurabi's vision of just society where every person knows their rights and obligations, where predictable consequences follow from specific actions, where disputes can be resolved through appeals to written standards rather than arbitrary whim. Your daily work as judge serves this larger vision, translating abstract legal principles into concrete decisions that affect real people facing real problems. The cases you've decided today, the fraudulent merchant, the troubled marriage, the disputed inheritance, will ripple outward through Babylonian society in ways both obvious and subtle. The merchant will conduct future business more honestly. The married couple will either reconcile or find other ways to resolve their difficulties. The three brothers will proceed with property division according to established legal principles. Each resolution creates precedent, reinforces social norms, and demonstrates the law's capacity to address human conflict. The seasonal rhythm of court work reflects broader patterns of Babylonian life. Spring brings disputes over irrigation rights and planting schedules. Summer generates conflicts related to harvest agreements and seasonal labor. Autumn produces inheritance cases as older citizens prepare for winter's uncertainties. These predictable cycles allow for administrative planning, ensuring adequate court capacity during busy periods, while providing opportunities for training and record maintenance during slower seasons. Your training for judicial service began in childhood with studies in mathematics, writing, and legal precedent. The position requires not just knowledge of law, but understanding of agriculture, commerce, family relationships, and human psychology. A judge must be part mathematician, part scholar, part counselor, and part administrator, someone capable of navigating complex technical requirements while remaining sensitive to the human consequences of legal decisions. The apprenticeship system that prepared you for this role continues with the young scribes and legal students who observe court proceedings, learning through direct experience how abstract legal principles apply to concrete situations. Tomorrow, one of these students will present his first independent analysis of a property dispute, demonstrating whether his training has prepared him for the responsibilities of legal service. As the evening meal concludes and household activities wind down toward sleep, you review tomorrow's case schedule, noting any complex matters that require additional preparation or research. The steady rhythm of judicial work preparation, hearing, deliberation, judgment, documentation provides structure, not just for individual cases, but for the larger social process of maintaining order through law. The oil lamps cast flickering shadows across the law tablets scattered on your study table. Their cuneiform characters, preserving the accumulated wisdom of generations of legal scholars and practitioners. These texts represent humanity's ongoing attempt to create systems of justice that transcend individual preference, cultural bias, and temporal limitation. Tomorrow will bring new disputes requiring the same careful attention to evidence, precedent, and legal principle that has characterized today's work. The quiet satisfaction of completed cases, properly documented and fairly decided, settles over the evening like a peaceful exhaustion that follows honest labor. Justice may be an abstract concept, but its daily implementation through patient attention to facts, careful application of law, and respectful treatment of all parties creates tangible benefits for everyone who depends on social order for their security and prosperity. The great law code will outlast individual judges, particular cases, and specific disputes, but its enduring value depends on daily application by people committed to its principles. Your small role in this larger system connects you to something both ancient and enduring, humanity's persistent effort to replace arbitrary power with reasoned judgment, personal vendetta with systematic justice, and social chaos with legal order. As sleep approaches and tomorrow's responsibilities await, the rhythm of legal life continues its measured cadence, predictable as the rising sun and as essential to civilization as the grain that feeds the city and the water that sustains its gardens. Conclusion. And so we come to the end of our quiet journey through the measured rhythms of ancient justice. From the careful preparations of a Chinese executioner's assistant to the philosophical courage of Socrates, from the divine trials of Anglo Saxon England to the methodical deliberations of a Babylonian judge, we've witnessed how different societies have sought to create order from chaos, to find balance between individual needs and collective welfare, to establish systems that could outlast the particular people who created them. Each of these approaches to justice carries its own logic, its own internal consistency, its own understanding of what it means to live together in organized society. The Chinese system with its elaborate bureaucracy of punishment, the Athenian democracy grappling with the tension between individual conscience and collective judgment, the Anglo Saxon appeal to divine intervention in human affairs, the Babylonian faith in written law and careful procedure, all represent different answers to the same fundamental questions about right and wrong, guilt and innocence, order and disorder. What connects these distant times and places is the persistent human need to create systems larger than individual preference, more enduring than personal power, more reliable than arbitrary judgment. Whether through ritual, philosophy, divine consultation, or written code, our ancestors sought certainties that could guide behavior, resolve disputes, and maintain the social bonds that make civilization possible. The rhythms we've explored tonight, the measured preparation, the careful ceremony, the patient deliberation, the inevitable consequence, continue in different forms in our own time. The tools may have changed, the procedures evolved, the underlying assumptions shifted, but the fundamental challenge remains. How do we live together justly in a world where individual desires conflict, where resources are limited, where perfect knowledge is impossible, and where the consequences of our decisions extend far beyond our immediate understanding? Perhaps there's comfort in recognizing these continuities, in seeing how each generation has faced similar challenges and developed its own solutions. The specific methods may seem strange or primitive or cruel, but the underlying commitment to justice, order, and social harmony represents something essentially human. Our refusal to accept chaos as the final word, our persistent belief that better ways of living together can be discovered and implemented. As you settle into sleep, let these ancient rhythms carry you gently toward rest. The careful preparations, the measured ceremonies, the patient deliberations of justice continue their work in the world. As steady and reliable as the turning of seasons, as enduring as the human hope for a more perfect society, as peaceful as the knowledge that some struggles transcend individual lifetimes and connect us to something larger than ourselves. Rest well, knowing that the great work of justice continues, patient and persistent, in its own measured time.